Guys, Keir Starmer would prefer not to talk about Brexit, but it's difficult for him to hide from the subject. He is stuck in a sense between a rock and a hard place. He needs to be seen as honest, and that would mean explaining to the public one of the reasons that the UK is in a worse position than other G7 nations is due to Brexit. Our reason social care and the NHS is understaffed is due to Brexit, and the reason many businesses are struggling is due to Brexit. Now that's the rock. The hard place is being honest would annoy the voters that he needs to win. So it seems he's trying to find a route between the two. Here he was on the Laura Kuenssberg show, treading that path.
And on that specific point about the damage to the economy, one of our viewers, Andrew Douglas, got in touch. He wants to know, will Keir Starmer be as bold as his colleague Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, who said this week that Brexit is to blame for many of the country's economic problems? Will you?
Well, I don't think the deal that the government has brought in is a very good deal, and I think it's doing damage to our economy. And so, of course, we will need to repair that. There's no going back into the EU. There's no go back into the single market. But I do think there's a case for a closer trading relationship with Europe. I absolutely think there's a case for fixing the protocol in Northern Ireland. I made a speech about that this week.
And you were there this week.
I absolutely think there's a case for closer cooperation on security. I think the Ukraine conflict has showed that the EU, the UK and NATO working together can have a closer relationship.
Black and white.
Okay. When it comes to security, that's nothing to do with Brexit. It's not going to impact, or has very little impact on the relationship from a security point of view when it comes to threats like Russia or what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. It would be better if the UK was a member of the European Union, but it's not a requirement. But when it comes to trade, how are you going to fix that? Businesses are struggling to export. It's becoming more and more difficult also to import. Being outside the single market makes it difficult. And I don't know what sort of deal he's talking about, because if you want to improve on the relationship, if you want to improve on the deal, then you need to present something to the European Union. But, you're still also going to be outside the single market. Now, it's frustrating to listen to because Starmer knows this, but he can't be honest, it seems. He can't say to people, look, the reason you're suffering at the moment is because we're outside the single market. There's nothing we can really do. We can't do anything about that. Because if the EU change some of the rules within the single market, we have to adopt those rules. We have to adapt. And we have no say. Wouldn't it be better if we were inside having a say? Now, of course, I think he would like to say that. But of course, if he wants to win the next election, he has to keep the people who still think Brexit was a good idea, or people who don't want to talk about Brexit anymore. He has to keep those people happy. And by saying we're going to rejoin the EU or we're going to re-enter the single market, by saying that, it opens up the discussion once again. And it's not just people who believe Brexit was a good idea. There are also lots of people who, of course, think it was a bad idea, but they don't want to talk about Brexit anymore. They don't want this debate starting. And this is probably what he's been receiving in his polling or these focus groups that the Labour Party have been conducting in these marginal seats. People don't want to talk about Brexit anymore. So he's avoiding talking about Brexit.
So there are things we can do to improve the situation we're in, but that doesn't mean going back to the EU. It doesn't mean going back.
And you've said many times you don't want to have the argument again. I think a lot of people watching might think that they don't want to have the argument again either.
A closer trade relationship, for example, would do a lot to improve our economy, and of course would ease tensions in Northern Ireland, because one of the biggest problems with the protocol is if there's a difference in Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom.
I know you don't want to have the argument again about whether or not we go back into the European Union, even though some people in your party would like you to say that you would go back into the European Union. But do you still think that Brexit was a mistake?
Well, look, I voted for Remain. I campaigned for Remain, but we put it to the public in a referendum. They voted to leave. We have left. And now we have to make it work.
Do you still think it was a mistake? Because you were campaigning to overturn the result. So unless you've had a personality transplant since 2016...
Well, of course I wanted a different result. Of course I did. That's why I campaigned for Remain. I wanted a different result in all the elections we had. That's why I want to win the next general election. But I'm focused on the future. We have left. We now have to have a better trading relationship. I don't think the deal that was supposed to be oven ready isn't at all a good deal for our country. We need to change that.
You keep saying a closer trading relationship.
Okay, as Laura Kuenssberg is saying, a closer trading relationship, what does that mean? Because people have to understand the reality of being outside the single market, the reality of being a third country. What is a closer trading relationship? Now, you can try and have some bilateral agreements with individual European countries, but it'll never be as good as membership of the European Union or the single market. So maybe this is what Starmer is talking about or trying to convey to the public. We can have some bilateral agreements with individual member states that is better than what we have at the moment. Okay, but why not improve on that? Why not have the best, that being EU membership and access to the single market? Look, once again, I think Starmer wants to win the next general election. He knows that he needs to convince people who are upset about Brexit, but not wanting to reopen the debate, and people who still think it's a good idea. He needs to win these people over. And hopefully, at the next, when he becomes Prime Minister, he will start talking about, look, we need to rejoin the single market. And in order to do that, we need to rejoin the EU. Perhaps that will be the debate after he's Prime Minister. I hope that's the case. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.